Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bharti, and welcome to a special edition of TFR Insights for KubeCon and Cloud EduCon. And today we have with us Dan Papandrea. You are also called as Pop. You are Field CTO at Sysdig. Dan, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Let's talk about the state of security in the cloud native space. Because if you look at cloud native, it is a bit different from traditional IT, legacy IT, whatever you may call it, because all the DevOps pipeline. So talk a bit about how security is a bit different in the cloud native space. Number one. Number two is that it's quite clear that it's no longer an afterthought. It is kind of becoming part of developers' pipeline. It is kind of becoming priority. So there are two things mixed in there. So please go ahead and tell me, what do you think?
Sure. I mean, as soon as you start, thinking about even moving to the cloud, you should be thinking about security first. I mean, it's hard because, if you can click a button and with various cloud providers and you have your instance, it's like, okay, it's, set and forget it. So I think you almost have to, basically like a DevOps team needs to start with Kubernetes and they need to basically they think that adding security will slow them down. And so it isn't really addressed as like an immediate, like an absolute necessary. And so you need to think about integrating or embedding security from the beginning. You need to think about, in your build process, being able to scan the images that are being deployed to your Kubernetes space, and then even run from like a threat protection or behavioral analysis, be able to enforce like compliance throughout the whole process. And even if there's anomalous behavior, like, runtime protection, those type of things, you need audit, like what commands have been run so that you can ideally, address these things. So, I mean, again, the TLDR on this is you need to embed security. If you're thinking about this, it's like you can't just click a button and have security. You can't click a button and have your instances without thinking about security. Don't think of it that it's going to slow you down. I think you need to integrate your security teams as part of your developer and the DevOps process.
Since we are talking about the difference between cloud native world and traditional world, what are some of the biggest security concerns that modern organizations face? And let's just stay specifically in the cloud native space.
So, I mean, again, it's the biggest things is waiting too long to address security. That's first and foremost. I mean, again, that's again a benefit of open source, but because you're going to be able to address it fairly quickly, but also just trying to take a legacy solution and apply it to in a cloud situation that it shouldn't. So I see it all the time. People are overwhelmed by point solutions, piecemealing setups, kind of saying, okay, this old tool will be able to do this. That's something I see. And then in terms of visibility, it's like, the concerns here is, you can't protect against what you can't see. And in this new cloud native paradigm, it's more like these containers or Kubernetes pods or, Fargate or something like this. Serverless things are almost like black boxes. So that to me is another thing, is having ultimate visibility and also just taking a complete secure DevOps approach. I mean, Kubernetes, it can be more secure than traditional infrastructure. You got to put the right guardrails on it, and you can't have security without overall deep visibility.
What direct impact security has on the release of new features and updates? Because sometimes, according to a lot of reports, companies don't push out updates or features because of security issues.
So, I mean, if you take a secure DevOps approach and integrate it into DevOps toolchain, security will slow releases if you try to use legacy security tools and not doing it integrated as part of a DevOps workflow. I mean, I'm doing a talk at KubeCon, for instance, on integrating that early in your pipeline as almost a one-on-one track. Security tools need to be SaaS delivery and also need to be DevOps ready. GitOps, you hear these terms all the time. It's like, well, there's advantages to doing this. If I'm going to put out a release and there's these are things that are going to squash these delays that happen, because it's like, well, I don't have to go ahead and interpret everything that's going in here. I'm already embedding that security, as part of the overall process. It's not a hindrance. It's actually a benefit to do these things.
Can you tell us a bit more about the talk that you'll be delivering at KubeCon?
Absolutely. So what we're doing here is I'm doing this with Steve Tarana from Booz Allen. We're basically taking an approach where we're taking we're creating a secure DevOps pipeline all the way from code generation all the way to postmortem from a runtime perspective, and kind of documenting this as a complete Jenkins templated engine. And we're doing some really cool things. We're attacking the container at all aspects of it, and or the pod at all aspects of it, and the service. And we're showing how you can, protect yourselves. Like the earlier question you said about like, hey, how do I, embed that security early? How do I, how do I kind of make these concerns kind of a forethought? Those are the things we addressed in the talk.
How many organizations have already embraced DevSecOps or Zero Trust? Do you have any stats there?
In terms of like, there's definitely an aspiration for companies to go to implement like DevOps, and it's definitely a journey. We see it starting with image scanning and people almost shifting left. Organizations like quickly want to they realize that they need even runtime security and incident response as well. So having that in a complete package, and also like the zero trust aspect of it is, there's network security for containers that are normally they're addressed as the company as grows. But like study after study, if you think about Gartner or Forrester or Adora, they're all showing that elite DevOps are embracing DevSecOps.
One more thing is that, as we were talking earlier, software bugs or misconfiguration are not the only causes, of vulnerabilities or securities. What are the other areas, factors that can lead to security issues?
Configuration. Again, it's like, a lot of folks are using, maybe using managed clouds. They're still, there's a certain level of protection. But like, if you think of, 58% of containers are running as root, right? So being able to like make sure you're protecting at the build process, but also the underlying host, being able to detect, NIST standard, CIS benchmarks that are attributed to a host. Because what's the typical process? I'll spin up an Amazon host or something like this, and then I'll install Kubernetes on it. Am I protected? Probably not. This is where, you need tools to be able to address those things, be able to get those configurations. I think also the things in terms of, talking about like, again, I mentioned Falco for runtime protection because there's anomalous behaviors that happen. So being able to not only address like software bugs, but underlying node host issues or runtime capabilities. I mean, our research team has shared over 7 blogs talking about like over the 6 months of specific CVEs for just, Kubernetes vulnerabilities. And, that to me is part and parcel of kind of understanding how just going beyond just, software level configuration or software bugs as a methodology. You need to think about the nodes. You need to think about runtime. You need to think about incident response and postmortem. You need to think about all of those things.
So far, we talked about the problem areas. We did talk about practice. Let's talk about some solutions. Talk about what is SYS doing. Of course, we all know what SYS is doing, but let's just talk about what is SYS doing in this space. And also, if you can also highlight a bit on network security. So I am throwing a lot of questions at you. Number one, tell me about what is SYS doing. Talk about network security. Third is that security, especially in the cloud native space, is getting very, very crowded. It's a busy space. So how are you also trying to differentiate yourself?
That's a lot of questions. So I'm going to break down one by one. So SysDig is, we offer security, compliance, and visibility, and powers organizations to confidently run containers, Kubernetes, and cloud services. So with our secure DevOps platform, we give you not only from the, almost your full pipeline, from your build all the way your postmortem. Like I mentioned earlier, you can't just think of just, hey, I'm going to put a vulnerability scanner in place and I'm good. It's like, no, I want to understand my underlying node is protected. There's no configuration issues there. I want to understand my code that I'm deploying is also devoid of issue. I also want to know from a runtime perspective that, there's no anomalous behavior. Like, again, if you think about Falco, it's our open source tool. That's the open source project that we're integrated as part of SysDig. It's just, again, this runtime behavioral language that people are creating all of these rule sets to be able to combat CVEs and then sharing them. So again, that open source piece of it, we're deployed as a SaaS platform. So it's, built on an open source stack. And you had mentioned something about network security. Again, we're releasing something at KubeCon where we're doing zero trust network security. So where you can have ultimately full visibility of what's going on, creating network policies, which network policies as themselves are a core component of Kubernetes, but doing it in an efficient way. So you're uniting, like I talked about earlier, uniting the developers and the operators and security teams to be able to say, okay, here's a network policy. Okay, I understand what's going on. Let me provide you the visibility of this network policy. So it's not just, again, being a hindrance to a user here, or a developer. They actually feel like they're embedded as part of the security process. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, hopefully I answered the three questions in a way you expected there.
I think the only one emphasis would be that how do you kind of differentiate yourself from in this very, very crowded space?
Without a doubt. Again, I think there's certain point solutions that are out there that doing specific vulnerability and all of those things, but we are the de facto runtime capability tool out there. We couple these things. We're deployed as a SaaS only platform, which again others do not do. We're built on an open source stack, which others do not do. We're contributing these rule sets out there. We have open source folks contributing these rule sets and also like sharing them out there. So again, that's the key differentiator that we do. SaaS, we have the capability to deploy as we have runtime capability. We have all of these built-in capabilities around zero trust in terms of network policy. Those are the key differentiators that we have out there.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for taking time out today from your schedule and talk about security in the cloud space. I wish we could have met in person at the event, but it's going to be virtual. But it's still good to be able to talk to each other remotely. And we are leveraging a lot of open source technology, and we are leveraging a lot of security tools that you guys are building there, even for these kind of things. So once again, thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. Love to speak to you again sometime.